All right, well, we're gonna get going and people can trickle in as needed. Welcome to our third workshop for track 2 of the California Adaptation Forum. Our track is on integrated planning for holistic solutions. We're excited to have you guys here today. We're going to be talking. Julia, do you want to put up the first slide or intro slide? I don't know. We're going to be talking about effective regional planning and collaboration. So once again, I'm one of the track facilitators. We also have Peggy and Rima joining us to help us out today, get through this agenda. In addition, Julia, Kelsey, and John from Local Government Commission are here to help you guys as needed. For any kind of support, feel free to contact any of them via chat if you have any technical difficulties or any questions about CAV. And for, let's see, if anyone's still joining, please make sure you can introduce yourselves via the chat and just rename yourself with your Zoom name, with your name, organization, and pronouns. Thanks. So once again, we want to remind everyone to please follow the group norms. Julia's gonna put those in the chat for anyone that doesn't remember them or wants a refresher, so we can check that out. So our last workshop. Oh. Hello?
Sorry, Whitney. This is Julia. I just got kicked out of Zoom because my connection is a little poor. John, if you could please share the group norms, the link to the group norms in the chat, and then also help share the screen share for the next portion, that would be great.
Sorry to hear that, Julia. Thanks, John, for helping us out. So last workshop, we had presentations on community engagement frameworks, followed by scenario-based exercises to help us craft inclusive community engagement strategies. And one thing we did at the end where we didn't really get to look at all the examples, participants were able to do a very rapid design of a postcard to promote a community engagement activity. And that helped us think about the importance of how we go about engaging communities. I don't know if John, if you have access to that slide deck. I know Julia was going to share some of these. But yeah, we had some really cool examples. Obviously, people didn't get much time to work on these, but it was really exciting still to see what people put together for their postcard ideas. Just go through a couple of those just so you guys can see what people worked on. And I think we're also going to put that in the chat, hopefully, so anyone who wants to actually look through all these and get ideas and think through them, you can look at them on your own time as well. So yeah, feel free to check those out. Good job for everyone who participated. Thank you for doing that. And then today, so we're building on that. We're going to go through brief presentations on multi-jurisdictional planning, regional collaboration, and key resources and tools to support regional efforts. And then later on in this workshop, we'll be doing a World Cafe style breakout discussions to focus on key challenges related to effective regional planning and collaboration. So now I'd like to introduce our speakers today. First, we have Lisa Hewlett. She is the grant manager with the County of Sonoma, specifically Permit Sonoma. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science with a master's from UC Berkeley in Public Administration and a master's of Business Administration from Sonoma State. She has a 20-year career that has focused on building strong multi-partner coalitions at both the local and national level. And a recent joint funding effort for $37 million to FEMA's Building Resistant Infrastructure and Communities Grant Program was highlighted by President Joe Biden during a press conference on June 30th, 2021. That's really cool. So Lisa's going to talk to us about Sonoma County's multi-jurisdictional LHMP planning efforts and how cities are using the regional plan to inform local implementation. Then next, Julia Kim from LGC, our very own Julia, will be highlighting an example of how a regional collaborative is moving beyond information sharing to support regional planning and local implementation. And then Rima, also one of our great facilitators, will be presenting tools and frameworks that have been developed to support regional adaptation planning. So with all of these speakers, we encourage you to share your questions via chat at any point during the presentations. At the end of the presentations, there will be a short question and answer period. So we're hoping to be able to answer those questions you provide to us at that time. So with that, I would like to welcome Lisa and invite her to present.
Thank you. I hope I'm sharing my screen with everyone. My name is Lisa Hewlett. I'm the grant manager at Permit Sonoma. Apologies in advance if you hear dogs barking in the background. It's a lingering impact from still working at home and thinking of working at home and thinking about community engagement. It was interesting to see patterns of community engagement mid pandemic when we were all at home, be at record highs because people were working at home. And as virtual meetings became the norm, people were very engaged. And then there was a burnout. And now when people are back at the office, it's getting harder and harder to get people to come back and engage in planning efforts. So constantly shifting. Oops. And so for some reason, today I'm going to give you a brief overview of what hazard mitigation planning is, what it isn't, who participated, the plan, the timeline, questions, and some web links. So mitigation is one of the 5 phases of emergency management. It's different than prevention, protection, response, or recovery. So it is not evacuation routes. It is not recovery, and it is not, go bags, something like that. It is risk reduction, projects that provide benefit to the community, projects like home elevation and flood zones, structural hardening, to prevent a disaster from happening. And FEMA invests a certain amount of money, knowing that if a disaster happens, then having mitigation projects will be less of an economic impact than if there's to be total loss. So 2 types of disaster planning. One is a hazard mitigation plan, which I'm going to talk about. It's proactive, develop actions to reduce or eliminate risk from future hazard events, and identifies implementation priorities based on hazard assessments. An emergency operations plan, which is usually held within a county's Department of Emergency Management, is reaction. It establishes overall operational concepts, and it details emergency management for any emergency or disaster. So it's 2 very different types of disaster planning. The hazard mitigation plan, while it establishes a broad vision for reducing risk and proposes specific actions to eliminate or reduce identified vulnerabilities, in its essence, it is a funding vehicle for local jurisdictions, local governments, to bring money in for mitigation projects that are identified through a very in-depth risk analysis and hazard assessment and guided by community participation. Like, what is important? What do the departments in that jurisdiction think is necessary? And how does that align with the community vision? It is not a policy. It is a plan, but it does provide the foundation for the safety element of the general plan. So it provides the information which will eventually become policy. And in the case of Sonoma County, we are also integrating our community wildfire protection plan into this plan because Sonoma County has such a history of wildfire as of late. The community wildfire protection plan really provides that extra community engagement portion which a standard hazard mitigation planning effort may not have. So why do a multi-jurisdiction plan? Typically, governments will do their own plan. They have what's called a local hazard mitigation plan. It is for like the unincorporated county, the city of Santa Rosa, a specific fire district, because as I mentioned, it's a funding vehicle. So they identify hazards and risks and vulnerabilities within their area. And then they would go for, seek funding to address those actions. We all know that disasters do not recognize jurisdictional boundaries. The 2017 Sonoma Complex fire drove that home even further. And so for the first time, Sonoma County embarked on a multi-jurisdiction hazard plan to enhance public awareness across boundaries, create a decision tool for community leaders to talk and amongst themselves and promote compliance with federal programs, and really promote interjurisdictional coordination. So then say cities could come together and develop a funding application to FEMA or CDBG or other funding sources, large funding sources that require you to have a hazard mitigation plan. They could go as partners. And now, the funding sources are really looking towards those partnerships. They would prefer to fund partnerships rather than in single jurisdictions. So in this particular planning effort, we had the County of Sonoma, the City of Santa Rosa. I won't go through everything, but we had we have all unincorporated county, most of the incorporated cities and towns, all the fire protection districts, and the 2 resource conservation districts. The few incorporated cities that did not participate were still included in the steering committee and other meetings, but they were in a different process in their hazard mitigation planning. So at the juncture that we started this, which was right when we kicked off COVID, or COVID kicked us off, they were either had just completed their plan or were at a different phase, so it didn't make sense. I'm not going to go through all this, but these are the partners that we pulled together to pull off this, what became an 800-page plan. And we hired Tetra Tech as our consultant to help put the plan together because of their long experience doing such plans. But we really also were looking at some non-traditional partners, such as the Nature Conservancy, the Builders Association, the Wine Grape Growers Commission, and CAL FIRE. And they really brought a different perspective and different members of their sphere of influence to bear, and their science for sure, on how we identified risk and hazard, and then how we communicated that out to our the people that live in our area. So the plan itself is 2 volumes. The first volume encompasses the entire region, and it is the risks, the hazards, the vulnerabilities, the capacity of each of the jurisdictions to actually implement, and then where the gaps in capacity might exist, where there might be data gaps, and applied, as I said, to the whole entire county. The second volume is the jurisdiction-specific annexes, which each jurisdiction, which their local governments will adopt. And it is the action that those jurisdictions, like the city of Santa Rosa or the town of Windsor, specifically want to take for their community. And those annexes are crosswalked with each of the other annexes to show coordination and partnership. But it does not take away from one jurisdiction's ability to find funding. It just shows where they have identified themselves as a lead and where the natural partnerships are. And one of the important parts of the planning process was to create a mission statement that all the jurisdictions could agree on, that fit within what the funder, wanted, and that the steering committee agreed by consensus. And it was to create a resilient Sonoma County for the whole community. I will not read these loud, but we had objectives of the plan, which were also agreed by consensus of the steering committee. And we had just a number of public meetings where we discussed the objectives of the plan with the community, did a number of surveys. And these objectives will help form basis for the safety element of the general plan and show what our highest priority actions are. So lifelines is a new term for FEMA. It used to be called critical infrastructure, and now they call them lifelines. So that might be a new term. Retrofit, purchase, or relocation of structures in high hazard area seems to be a really popular thing. Popular, I don't know if that's the best word. High priority item for FEMA to fund in wildfire and flood areas, because structural hardening, defensible space, elevating buildings in the flood zone have really shown to help minimize total loss of those buildings and protect people and property in the event of a disaster. One of the ways we communicate out to the community is through a story map. It has updated hazard and risk data. It identifies community involvement opportunities and reflects the current status of Sonoma County's mitigation plan update. For instance, as projects are implemented, they will be populated into the story map. And then one of the really interesting parts of it is you can enter an address, a region, a place into the story map, and it will show you what the ranking is for a particular hazard in, down to the address level. So a person can put in their address and know if they are in a high fire hazard zone, if they are in a fault area, if they are in a flood zone. And it's also really useful for planning purposes to identify, where developments are going to occur and what the hazards might be in those particular regions. So for instance, if you put into the story map, Sonoma County, and say the Rogers Creek Fault had a magnitude 7 or greater, you could select what type of impact that would potentially have in an area. And I chose for this, number of structures exposed. So based on a number of scenarios, there would be 173,484 structures that would be potentially exposed to total loss in the event of a magnitude 7 or greater seismic event in the county. Hazard, 100-year flood is also important. So here, and this is all in the story map, and I'll share a link. I used just a specific address, downtown Cotati, in Sonoma County. What kind of structure exposure would there be in the event of 100-year flood as it is defined today? And that definition, based on statistical variability could change, but there would be 219 structures. This this hazard exposure dashboard also puts a monetary, you can put a monetary value. It has an economic benefit or economic loss. Like, what would be the economic loss in the event of 100-year flood in downtown Cotati, or the population that would be potentially exposed. So all that information is really valuable, both to when you're applying for funding and when there is a need to develop, identify planning changes or policy changes. So this project timeline is slightly out of date as of today. There was a public comment period that happened July 12th. The plan was submitted on August 6th. And as of today, about 10 minutes ago, we received approval pending adoption from both FEMA and Cal OES. So it has been approved by the state and federal agencies, and we are very happy about that. It was very quick. We've been working with them hand in hand throughout this process to ensure that the plan would be eligible for what is now the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the Building Resilient Infrastructures and Communities, which is about $1 billion right now. And we're likely to see another $1 billion come to California for wildfire. And you need to have one of these plans in order to be eligible for that funding. So FEMA and Cal OES are very motivated to make sure that not only Sonoma County, but all the jurisdictions within Sonoma County could be eligible to apply for that funding. So approval pending adoption means that the state and the feds have approved the project. It will go to the County Board of Supervisors to consider adoption on November 7th of this year. And with that, here are the links to the plan. I can populate those in chat. Here is the email. I will be leaving the County of Sonoma on October 1st, so we'll be less available to answer questions going forward. But one of the planners who will be taking over my position as I move on to other things will be more than happy to answer any questions, and this email will be the best way to contact us. And with that, I'm open to any questions, wondering if I should look in the chat. What's the best way to address?
What we're going to do, Lisa, is have all three speakers go and then do a Q&A for everyone at the end.
Cool. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
So really appreciate it, Lisa. Thank you so much. And if you guys have questions for Lisa, please drop them in the chat. And if you have any questions for any of the following speakers, please drop those in as well. So now Julia's going to take over with this next presentation.
Thanks, Whitney. And thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us. It was a great presentation, and glad to hear that it was approved. So I'm going to share an example of a regional collaborative that has been able to move beyond information sharing. This is just one example. There are so many more that I could point to, but today I'll focus on the Capital Region Climate Readiness Collaborative, or CRCRC. This is a regional climate collaborative that is working in California's 6-county capital region, or the SACOG region. It's a multidisciplinary network. You can see some of the different public agencies, as well as other nonprofits private sector businesses and other associations that are included here. And while this is an example of moving beyond information sharing, I should note that it all starts with information sharing. Several years ago, there was an urban heat island study conducted for the Sacramento County area, and it essentially found that the heat that's generated in Sacramento's urban core actually migrates outside of the project area. So we wanted to create a regional urban heat island model and sought funding, and we were ultimately awarded the Caltrans SB1 Transportation Adaptation Planning Grant. And here's where the regional collaborative was really essential in making this happen. First, becoming aware of the issue itself, seeing how the heat generated in Sacramento's urban core was migrating outside of the county, and having a project concept kind of at least at a high level, kind of fleshed out in advance of actually identifying the funding opportunity. And I don't know if folks remember the first round of SB1 Transportation Adaptation Planning grants. It was a rather tight timeline. I think we had just a few weeks to pull a rather complex grant application together. So we were able to leverage multiple folks from the collaborative to support the application writing process, refine the project scope concept even further, leverage our network to ensure that we brought in the in-kind match, the in-cash match, support letters, et cetera, to pull together a robust application that was ultimately successful. This project developed a detailed model of the urban heat island effect in the Sacramento region. It not only looked at the urban heat island index in the current scenario as well as future scenarios, it also modeled the effectiveness of various heat mitigation measures and what their cooling potential would be. These findings were paired up with what we were hearing from the community to then develop an urban heat island mitigation plan. I should note this is not a mandated plan or a formal plan like what Lisa presented. It's more so a regional strategy or roadmap. I'll also note with the community engagement that we were doing at a regional scale is rather challenging. So the collaborative was also key in coming in and supporting community engagement efforts. Much of our efforts were focused on going to existing community events, festivals, neighborhood association meetings, and working with local agencies that were conducting community engagement related to climate change and leveraging those efforts. So you can see a couple of screenshots from the model itself, looking at the urban heat island index and then also exploring the cooling potential of different strategies. So some of the main heat mitigation measures we explored were urban greening and urban forestry, so canopy cover, looking at increasing albedo through cool roofs, cool pavements. We also looked at the expansion of electric vehicles as a way to reduce internal combustion engines in the region and the heat that's generated through that, as well as other electrification measures. So ultimately, the plan included a set of recommended strategies for a number of different jurisdictions in the region. And I should note this project wrapped up right before the pandemic hit. So we did have to kind of pivot in how we thought about how we could best engage local agencies, and folks were really kind of dealing with and still are dealing with COVID recovery and addressing that emergency at hand. So currently we have a working group that's formed. We're working to devise a clearer strategy to engage local agencies. We'll then quickly pivot to then engage with local agencies in the capital region to better understand what their priorities are for the agency, for their communities, and to also uplift some of the priority solutions that we explored through this project, and providing policy support, technical support, and any additional support that we can. And a big piece of that is grant support. We know that we're in a resource-constrained environment, so we're looking to do something similar as we did with this effort in providing some additional staff capacity to pursue grant opportunities to ultimately support implementation. So I know that was rather quick, but I'll stop there and pass it over to Rima to share some regional tools for adaptation planning.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks for that quick overview. All right, so we wanted to talk a bit about other regional adaptation planning tools that are available. And this is really just a representative sample, and there'll be a chance for all of you to share other tools that you've come across or you were part of later on in this webinar. And so the regional tools that we've seen apply at different scales. Some are applicable statewide, some countywide, others as large as metropolitan planning organizations. The tools and resources themselves also vary. Sometimes they're just sort of guidebooks and steps that agencies can take to increase climate adaptation and resilience, while others are technical vulnerability assessments to really understand the problem and identify adaptation strategies. So the first tool I'll speak to is the Regional Resilience Toolkit. This was prepared by FEMA, EPA, and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and Association of Bay Area Governments. It's intended to be applied statewide, and it's a regional resilience toolkit that establishes a roadmap for cities, counties, and other entities seeking to integrate hazard mitigation, climate adaptation, sustainability, and equity into a common action plan. And it identifies the steps you can take to prepare such a plan. It is focused broader than just climate adaptation, looking more holistically at resilience. So it does consider and include hazards not typically associated with climate change, such as earthquake risk. This toolkit has a lot of very wonderful worksheets and 2 appendices to it. So I encourage you to look at those worksheets. They're intended to support all kinds of steps that you would take as part of the planning process, from workshop checklists, asset manager questionnaires, if you're looking to understand asset risks, how to do a very broad stakeholder mapping exercise to make sure you're pulling in all stakeholders. So those worksheets are really excellent tools to help in the process. So moving into more regional-based tools, this tool was prepared by the San Francisco Estuary Institute, which is an aquatic and ecosystem science institute, and SPUR, which is a nonprofit urban policy organization based in the Bay Area. It applies to the San Francisco Bay and all upland areas that could be affected by sea level rise. This Atlas tool developed operational landscape units, which are basically geographic areas around the San Francisco Bay that share common physical characteristics. They take into account natural shoreline processes like tides, waves, sediment movement. They do not take into account traditional jurisdictional boundaries like city limits and county boundaries. So it's really intended to be more landscape scale units. And the outcome of this project was twofold. One was an Adaptation Atlas report produced in 2019 and an online mapping tool. And the report identifies the 25 different operational landscape units, existing characteristics around each one, and nature-based adaptation measures or hybrid nature engineering measures that could be applied in the region and where they could be applied in the area, as well as nature-based adaptation solutions that are that could be applicable to each of the landscape units. The online interactive mapping tool provides information about sea level rise. It identifies different existing shoreline protection structures and transportation infrastructure, location of wetlands, location of existing planned or under construction restoration projects. So really the intent of this tool is to go beyond jurisdictional boundaries and look at landscape systems and identifying nature-based solutions along those lines. Moving a little bit further south is the Santa Clara County Silicon Valley 2.0. This was prepared by Santa Clara County and applies to the county-wide and is intended to support the county and cities in understanding the vulnerability to climate change. They prepared a decision support tool, which is a web-based tool that you can run queries at city scale, county-wide scale, or unincorporated county community. You could look at different climate variables, sea level rise, riverine flooding, wildfire, extreme heat, different future horizon years, and then select the assets like transportation or hazardous sites and understand the risk that those could have to different climate variables. They're currently updating Silicon Valley 2.0 to also include other aspects like economic assets, social and public health related impacts. The other aspect of this tool that I'll mention is it does include a risk-based framework. So it looks at the potential consequence of how climate change could impact a certain asset and the likelihood of the event. And based on that, it prioritizes risk based on low risk to extreme risk. So that helps with a prioritization approach. And this is intended for cities to kind of work through this to understand their vulnerability specific to their local jurisdiction. There's also a report that came out that identifies different adaptation strategies that can be utilized. Moving to Southern California, the Southern California Association of Governments, the MPO that applies to 6 different counties in 191 cities in Southern California, developed a regional climate adaptation framework. This is very similar to the resilient framework and the state adaptation planning guide, where it's kind of a step-by-step guide on how to go about climate adaptation. But it's focused on Southern California case studies, and it did provide new tools and resources, including communication strategies, how to communicate with the public on this topic, templates, slide deck templates, workshop flyer templates that can be used, as well as model policies for local coastal programs, model policies for your general plan, and a large compendium of different adaptation strategies applicable to different climate variables as well. And there's a financial tool available that you could see different funding mechanisms and strategies that can be used to fund adaptation. And lastly, the Resilient IE Toolkit was prepared by Western Riverside Council of Governments and the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority. This applies to Western Riverside County and San Bernardino County, and developed a vulnerability assessment report that looked at the countywide vulnerability and developed profile sheets for each of the member cities in the planning area. It also has an evacuation mapping tool where you can look at local evacuation routes, regional evacuation routes, and overlay them with hazard layers. This was really intended to support cities that will be embarking on safety element updates, hazard mitigation plan updates, and have to comply with new state legislation, AB 747, SB 99, that looks at emergency evacuation planning, something that cities are beginning to work through. And Resilient IE is looking to create a climate collaborative as well to continue the cooperation and collaboration that's going on in this region. And that's it for me.
Thanks so much, Lisa, Julie, and Rima, for sharing those really helpful tools for climate adaptation planning on a regional scale. We do have a few questions. I'd like to invite anyone else who would like to ask the speaker some questions to input your question into the chat, and we'll see if we can get to it. But I'd like to start first just focusing on regional collaboration, to ask the speakers if you could please let us know how, we'll start with Lisa. How did your planning effort help to establish a foundation for interjurisdictional coordination?
I think initially we had envisioned a project that was very different. It was before the pandemic. And we had a very traditional planning approach where we'd get together and identify priorities, Post-its on a wall. And then with the pandemic, we really had to dig a little deeper in developing relationships. And I made sure that I reached out to each of the planning partners personally on a regular basis, established, regular meetings with various jurisdiction groups that were natural allies, like the cities, the conservation districts, the fire protection districts, and then had made sure the steering committee had a role that wasn't, just perfunctory, that they actually provided some value, because we had some really powerful steering committee members.
Lisa, can I also ask you, how did you incorporate climate change into your hazard mitigation plan?
Sure. So we have a chapter on climate change. It was written largely by a partnership of the Nature Conservancy, Pepperwood Preserve, and Tetra Tech. And so while we didn't specifically do climate change predictions, we do have a placeholder for, for what, the impacts of climate change, how we're seeing them on the land, and that going forward, we will identify the risks and hazards in a more science-based approach rather than a narrative.
Thank you so much. And one final question for any of the speakers. Actually, I'll let you choose from two. One is, what do you see as key factors to successful regional coordination and collaboration? And the other one is, what funding opportunities are out there that could provide preference to regional collaboratives?
I can say the funding opportunities are numerous. There hasn't been this much money specifically for resilience, climate adaptation in, many administrations. And we have an opportunity now to put that money to ground, and we may not have that opportunity again.
Thank you. Anyone else from the panel?
Yeah, echoing what Lisa said, I think we always need more in terms of resources to support adaptation efforts, but we are facing, we're in a very exciting time here in California, that's for sure, with the climate resilience budget package getting approved. We'll actually be covering that as part of the closing plenary for CAF. There is a new program that will be a grant program that will be established for regional adaptation planning, some resources allocated for the SB 1072 regional climate collaboratives, which is slightly different at a slightly different scale, a little more localized and a little more focused on building the capacity of under-resourced communities and applying for and competing for climate dollars. So that's definitely something to track. We'll be tracking that closely here at LGC in preparation for those funds. And I think generally as a key factor for successful regional collaboration, again, speaking to Lisa's point, relationships, it's all about relationships in a lot of what we do, right? So finding who those champions are, finding who those allies are, and bringing other voices in that are often unheard or just missing from the table, and doing that relationship building work now and in an ongoing way, I think can best position folks to get prepared for the new grants that are coming up.
Great, I'm looking forward to that, Julia. Thanks so much. Lisa, Julia, and Rima, thank you so much for your presentations. We do have a few questions in the chat. If you'd like to answer, if you're able to, if you could please take a look and see if you can answer them, that would be great. At this point, let's take a bit of a stretch break. I'll play a little bit of music for a while, and we're going to reconvene in 3 minutes for a poll and a Jamboard exercise. So we'll see you in 3 minutes, everybody. Thanks so much. All right, well. Welcome back, everyone. It is now time for a large group. Let me close that out. For a large group exercise, and what we have planned is a brief poll, and then we'll follow that with a Jamboard exercise. And what we'd like to accomplish during the Jamboard is to get as many great ideas from you as possible about tools and resources that you've come across or you're using for regional collaboration. Another part of the board is we'd love to hear from you examples of successful regional collaboration. So let's start with the poll. Julia, if you could help us with that. Just take a moment to answer this question. How are you currently engaging in regional collaboration for climate adaptation? Do you serve as a convener or leadership role for regional collaboration efforts? Are you a member of a regional collaborative or regional network? Do you collaborate with one or more jurisdictions in your region? Are you interested in regional collaboration, but you haven't had the capacity to be actively engaged? And are you not interested in regional collaboration? It's not relevant to your work. And go ahead and select one and submit, please.
All right, let's see if we can get to 100%. Peggy, I'll let you know kind of where we're at. We have 45%, about 50% of folks responding. And folks, you're also able to select more than one option if you're doing multiple things.
And if folks, and Julia, did you want to share the link in the chat as well for the Jamboard for the folks who are done with the survey? Maybe they can get straight to the Jamboard. And so once you get into the Jamboard, if you could please add sticky notes again, 1 for examples of successful regional collaboration and 2 for tools and resources for regional collaboration. And we'll do this until 2 o'clock. So you have about 8 more minutes. And I'll go ahead. Is it okay, Julia, for me to share that Jamboard?
I just shared the link to the Jamboard through chat.
Okay.
We have most folks respond to the poll. I'm going to give folks another maybe 30 seconds, and then I'll share the results.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right, if you haven't taken the poll yet, now is your time. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll here in just a second. All right. And here are the results. I think you should be able, folks should be able to see.
I see you.
I think it's good to see that no one said that they're not interested in regional collaborations. It's good to see that folks see the value in it. But a good number said that, yeah, there was interest, but I just haven't had the capacity to get actively engaged. That's helpful to know.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Are collaborating.
Can everyone see those results? Thanks so much, Julia, and thank you everyone for participating. So at this time, can you click on that Jamboard link that was shared with you in the chat, and let's join each other in the Jamboard for about 6 minutes. If you could please share your examples here on this board, that would be great. And it's just tile 1 that we're filling in, just Jamboard 1 that we're filling in. So far we have SoCal Connect, which is the Southern California area government's effort on regional collaboration. There's integrated regional water management planning, Beacon of Santa Barbara and Ventura counties, JPA. Can whoever wrote that down share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, hi Peggy. This is Doug George from NOAA. I'm the one who put Beacon in there. Yeah, Beacon is related to erosion and beach nourishment along the 2 counties, and so it's been around and water quality as well, clean oceans. So it's been focused on climate adaptation and coastal resiliency and sediment management right now, and there's activities around developing a science agenda to address how to combine climate resilience and sediment management from a watershed to ocean perspective.
Thank you. And do you also do coastal wetland restoration?
That's within the jurisdiction, so yes. Yep.
Wow, I'm looking forward to checking that out. Thanks for sharing that. Okay,
Sure.
we also have Bay Area Climate Adaptation Network's Equity Working Group, Regional Flood Management Planning, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act Planning, Alliance of Regional Collaboratives for Climate Adaptation, ARCA, Groundwater Sustainability Agency, San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative. Whoever put down Bay Area Climate Adaptation Network's Equity Working Group, could you tell us a little bit about that?
I added that one. This is Julia. Yeah, so BayCan, that's a regional climate collaborative for the 9-county Bay Area. I think I see a couple folks who are actually members of that collaborative, but they launched an equity working group pretty close to when the collaborative actually formed. And through that equity working group, they've been compiling a number of resources for the member agencies in the Bay Area. And I believe they recently released a guide for climate practitioners to integrate equity into their adaptation planning and implementation activities.
That
They
sounds
also have a great
interesting.
model for compensating community-based organizations for the time that they spend supporting the working group.
Thanks, Julia. Can you add those two to the tools and resources side? The 2 that you mentioned? Thank you. All right, let's see what else. We have Climate Science Alliance of Southern California. Can someone tell us a little bit about that? Okay, can
Hi,
someone, okay,
uh,
you're ready.
Hi, this is Bob Leiter, and I'm a planner in San Diego. And the Climate Science Alliance actually covers San Diego County and other Southern California counties, and it focuses on making the connection between climate change from a science and a policy standpoint. And it obtains grants for various entities, including tribal governments in San Diego, to work on climate-related climate adaptation strategies and actions.
So do you have anything that you use to support your co-applicants, your grant applicants in developing their projects and their grant applications?
You know, I'm a participant, not a manager of the program, but I do believe that they provide assistance. For example, the Connecting Wildlands and Communities project, which is being undertaken through San Diego State University, obtained its grant funding from the state through assistance from the Climate Science Alliance. So that's a good example of that.
And would there be grant applications posted on the web page of the Alliance?
That I'm not sure about. Again, I know they do a lot of collaboration, but I don't know if they actively post grants so much as help organizations to obtain grants in the areas that they're familiar with.
Okay, that's so wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Bob. Okay, we're almost done here. Could I ask, I see some tools and resources are being shared. And I know there are a lot more than that. Hopefully we'll be able to provide participants with a longer list, but let's hear from some of the participants. I see Tribal Climate Health Project Exposures, Impacts and Strategies tool. Could whoever posted that please share a little bit about that?
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm Angie Hacker with Prosper Sustainably. This is a project actually led by the Paul Abandon Mission Indians, federally funded for the last 5 years. It's a capacity building program, and it has built a tool to correspond with its trainings. And it's just acknowledging the difficulty navigating so many data sources. So it continually enhance it. It's continually enhanced with collaboration with Southern California tribes at this moment to provide greater access to the best climate and health resilience data publicly available that can help communities, identify and address their unique climate and health vulnerabilities. So it's a big dump of all of the best sources and indicators that we could find, put into an inventory that can also be used as a worksheet and a tool to guide folks through their vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan.
Angie, thanks so much for sharing that. That sounds really amazing. If anyone actually, today we saw a lot of resources that were based on GIS data sets. If anyone has resources for how to pull together data sets to help with climate adaptation like that, if you could post that under tools and resources, that would be great. We are out of time for this exercise, but you're welcome to add sticky notes for the rest of the session if you think of anything. I'm going to move on to the next section right now, which is to transition to Whitney to introduce our next activity. Whitney?
Thanks, Peggy. So now that everyone has your thinking caps on and juice is flowing, we're going to jump into smaller group breakout rooms. What we want to do is we want to talk about the big questions that still need to be resolved in order to make regional collaboration even more effective. So we've seen, as you guys posted, some successful regional efforts to collaborate on adaptation planning, but we want to think through some of these questions about how to enhance regional collaboration in the long term. And these breakout discussions are going to explore questions, some of which are also being explored by the Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resilience Program, also known as ICARP. They're through their Technical Advisory Committee for the whole state of California. So the questions are going to be: one, how should a region be defined? Who should be leading regional planning? And what authorities are needed to tackle climate adaptation? Two, what is the ideal function that regional collaboratives should play, and how do we get there? What would we see as an indicator of success? Number three, how do we hold ourselves and others accountable to engage in and advance regional adaptation efforts? So what we're going to do, we're going to do this in a World Cafe style, which means everyone in this group will be assigned randomly to a breakout room. There will be 3 different breakout discussions, one for each question, 15 minutes each. So for the 3 of us facilitators, each of us have been assigned to one of those questions. You guys will be staying in your same group, and we're the ones that are going to be rotating around, bringing you a new question each time. And once again, we're going to be using that Jamboard, the same link you have, just one of the other pages, to start adding our answers and ideas and thoughts. Does anyone have any questions before we launch into the breakouts? All right, then,
All
Julia,
right.
send us away.
Yes, I'll go ahead and launch, and I'll share some time reminders along the way. So enjoy the conversation. Is there anyone unassigned? All right, John, feel free to pop around. Let me actually pause the recording. Hi, folks, welcome back. Y'all have sure been busy. I think our facilitators have their work cut out for them to try to summarize some of the key takeaways for us. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and here we go. All right, I think Peggy, this is you. Do you want to share a few key takeaways from the 3 rounds of discussions you facilitated?
Okay, first I wanted to say I really love this format. There is much livelier discussion. I love that the group got to stay together. So thank you for setting it up this way. For our question, how should for the question, how should a region be defined? We got a lot of discussion on this, and we had ideas such as watersheds, metropolitan boundaries, freight transport corridors. So it was really all over the map, but basically I think how I could summarize it is that it really depends on what you're collaborating about. And then it depends on the natural environment that that's embedded in. And so you have to think about what are the physical constraints that would affect the way that you would strategize about how to solve the climate adaptation problem for your particular issue. Other ideas for thinking about it were to define a region along the lines of what risk you're dealing with. So for example, sea level rise along the coast might form a region for collaboration purposes. And who should be leading it? It seemed to be really dependent on what the problem was that was needing to be solved. But there seemed to be a consensus that there should be kind of local involvement in determining who should be leading it. And the authorities that they would be needed would need to be granted from the local government organizations. And sometimes that might be best done through a joint powers authority. And that's our summary.
Facilitator. So Whitney, I'll turn it to you next. Yeah, curious to hear some of the key takeaways or any themes that came up.
Do you want to flip to that next slide? So we had, as Peggy said, we had ideas all over the place of the ideal function of regional collaboratives. A lot of creating genuine partnerships, whether it's with private sectors, CBOs, tribal leadership, climate scientists, also helping with things like policy permitting, grants, policies, peer learning groups. So I guess the theme was we want everything in our regional collaboratives. We see a lot of benefits to being part of them and what they could become and helping us solve problems together. So there's lots of different ideas, as you can see on here. So, the yellow's the first question, the orange the second question. So for indicators of success, a lot of stuff was having funding through multiple agencies, participating in lots of groups or meetings with people from all different kinds of representation, seeing that the community is responding. They support more, they understand what's going on more, they're involved more, and developing of things like metrics, JPAs, things that come out of it, actual projects implemented. So once again, lots of different ideas, but it was a really good discussion. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Whitney. I'm seeing this as a list of action items for me personally, just given the role that I have in supporting collaboratives. So this is super helpful. Last but not least, Rima, I'll pass it to you next.
Okay, thanks, Julia. So this was also a lot of great ideas. So just a highlight, this is the question on how we hold ourselves and others accountable to maintain our engagement in regional adaptation effort and actually see adaptation take place on a regional scale. So there were a variety of ideas looking at engaging our politicians to help set priorities for the entities they're representing. So that helps to filter down to departments and department budgets to make sure that regional collaboration is a priority. Looking at being mindful of how collaboratives are set up and making sure that they're a very useful use of everyone's time and lead to action and are targeted to the entities that their members are part of. Also looking at the grant funding. So thinking about how grant programs are set up so that they can require or expect certain regional collaboration, or that you can't access grant funding if you're not in compliance with state rules or regional collaboration requirements. Establishing performance metrics, measures, and reporting that out. Looking at agencies or state agencies that can be a combination of establishing regulations and being a source of funding, similar to CARB. There was a lot of dynamics between, should it be a mix of carrots and sticks, or should it be more focused on motivation and trying to look at people's motivations and what it would make sure that they maintain interest and accountability. Increasing transparency, so the public can hold entities accountable as well, was another idea. We were warned that if you look too much to grant funding and defining it very carefully to be regional collaboration, that sometimes the entity is going to be steering projects rather than the local steering the projects or making sure the project is really suiting the needs of the region. So a lot of excellent discussion. It's a good challenging question to answer.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a huge thanks to three of you, and then of course everyone else for engaging in these conversations, and quite the journey we've been on through this track, starting with broader challenges and potential solutions to a scenario-based exercise, digging deeper into community engagement, and now tackling some of the big questions that remain, the big elephants in the room as far as regional collaboration goes. So given that this is our third and final workshop, certainly want to give some airtime to each of our track facilitators to share some closing remarks. Rima, take it away.
All right, so yeah, that was a great, interesting webinar. Really appreciate everyone's input. We will be sharing the resources from this workshop next week, so you can access the slide deck and other resources we provided. We really hope you can join us at the next webinar, which is going to focus on a summary, sort of key takeaways of all the workshops that we had, as well as case study presentations, sort of providing examples and case studies of integrated planning solutions, holistic solutions. It's scheduled for October 19th from 12:30 to 2. And we really encourage you all to join us. Anything else from Whitney or Peggy? Okay, great.
I just wanted to thank everyone for your participation. It's really a wonderful opportunity to hear from a lot of people thinking about and solving problems in a different way. And today's format I thought was especially rewarding. And so I appreciate everyone's participation today. I'm looking forward to seeing the list of tools that comes out of this. And I think Local Government Commission and the Office of Planning and Research for supporting this event.
Okay, so we hope to see you again October 19th. Thank you, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.